Hi, and apologies for not being able to make today's grand rounds. James suggested you might be looking at chronic illness, so here's a quick overview from me. So, um, I just want to talk about the impact of chronic illness on role and identity. When you're a young person like yourselves, you take on all of these roles, and these roles give you a sense of meaning, a sense of who you are. So, for example, you guys, you're currently university students. You might have work, your friends, you have relationships, you might be in partnerships. These roles are really, they give you a sense of meaning, they give you a sense of direction, they make, to a large extent, you and give you a sense of identity. Similarly, going a little bit further along the life course, people have roles that give them meaning and identity. So, as an older person, you might be in full or part time work, you might be married, in a partnership. Again, you might be a parent, a friend, a colleague, a relationship. All of these kind of different components of your life would be roles that you will be undertaking, and again, giving you meaning. And obligations associated with them. The difference between the young and the older person is younger is a time of transition, older is a time when you're more stable with dependence. So imagine, okay, all of a sudden you become chronically ill. What happens? All of these roles, because of incapacity, because of various kind of malfunctions in the body, become a lot harder to achieve. So for example, in young people, you may have to drop out of school, or if you're a bit older, drop out of university. You might not be able to maintain friendships and partnerships and so on. Certainly with young people, the issue there becomes that the transition to independence actually for many people becomes stopped. In an older person, again, you might have to drop out of work, parenting becomes problematic, all of the roles become problematic. So what happens when you become chronically ill, or perhaps you kind of suffer from a devastating disability, is all of these meaningful roles start to drop off and start to disappear because you can't maintain the relationships that they require. And as a result of that, life becomes much more, or can become much more narrow in focus. And this has often been described in the literature as a time of real kind of ontological uncertainty. Oh, I need to hurry up. So, some useful ideas. Disruptive biography is a really useful term to describe the huge difficulty that people have when they suddenly find that the life as they expected is not going to go according to plan. You can see here the narrative, the metaphor of a story, that when chronic illness strikes, you have to drop out and change. Things that you actually had taken for granted and that you'd expected to happen. So I talked about disruptive biography. Living with uncertainty is another huge issue that we see less when we're not chronically ill. So, uncertainty can be around, treatments, it can be around doctor's appointments, it can be around prognosis, it can be around relationships. Uncertainty when you become chronically ill becomes much, much more marked. The next one that I'm coming up with in a minute is the embodied nature of illness. So, embodiment is another sociological term that just sort of takes a dictionary definition to a new level, and it refers to the idea that we tend to we take our bodies for granted, unless, for example, we're hungover, shudder at the thought, or we've got something wrong with us. We tend to just expect our bodies to take us where we want to go, to let us carry on what we want to do. And again, in chronic illness, or in some cases in disabilities, all of a sudden we become much more aware of our bodies, and that's a real issue for people with chronic illness. I just want to draw your attention to strategies and styles of coping. This is a huge area of the literature, particularly in psychology. Quite often in medicine, it's assumed that people have to be good copers, that they will eventually become good copers. The reality from social research suggests that people have good days and they have bad days, and that it's really important to get alongside that, and certainly not judge individuals for being, let's say, bad copers. Almost finally, I want to draw your attention to the difference between legitimated and non-legitimated chronic illness. You will come across this again in your grand rounds, but certainly some illnesses are more legitimate than others. And by that I mean, by non-legitimated illness, things like chronic fatigue syndrome, pain syndromes, syndromes where there's no kind of noticeable pathological cause. Mental illness conditions can be really seen as not real, and that is problematic. The experience of diagnosis matters. You, as doctors, are going to be the gatekeepers for entrance into the sick role. So, how people react and get diagnosis matters. One of the issues is that people can go a long time without diagnosis and try and continue their normal roles, making illness worse. Another problem is that there's actually another good thing about diagnosis is that diagnosis can be such a relief for individuals who suddenly can work out a plan. Okay, I now know what I've got. I now know where I'm going. Finally, I just want to say that the doctor-patient relationship is necessarily different when working with individuals suffering from chronic illness than it is with, say, acute illness. Everything that we teach here, the doctor-patient relationship, it tends to be focused on the one-off presentation. I just want you to consider how you might respond differently to individuals who have chronic illness. Remember, the literature says that it's better to get alongside, to try and bear witness, to appreciate their suffering as such, than to try and get a cure. Thank you. That's a wrap, or a grand round.